What do you think? Do you think the 126 million quid, 62 million quid, I'll start again. Do you think the 162 million quid was value for money for the Queen's funeral?
Absolutely. Look, 160 million pounds is a lot of money to you and me. Well, I don't know what your paycheck is at GB News, but it's only 0.01% of UK government expenditure, which is £1 trillion. You know, it's £2 per person. Just this morning, it was announced that the SNP Renfrewshire Council, due to a blunder with a school building project, now has to pay 160 million for that school. The inauguration of the US president every 4 years costs 100 million. You know, 160 million is what Cristiano Ronaldo earns every year. Is what football clubs pay to transfer players like Eden Hazard did. Russia's losing 160 million every day through sanctions, and you wouldn't even get into the top 50 Hollywood films for 160 million. Most of them are over 200 million, if not 400 million. Set against that context, I think the price of this was extremely fair, given that this was a historic event, unparalleled, the longest-serving monarch in our history, the second longest-serving monarch in world history after Louis XIV. Surely the biggest event since the Second World War was something that we should all have commemorated, given the huge outpouring of emotion that surrounded Her late Majesty's death.
OK, Rafe, Tessa, I'll throw it over to you now, historian and broadcaster Tessa Dunlop. A lot to go at there. Where are you on this, Tessa?
Well, contrary to your expectations, and I don't wish to disappoint you, Patrick, but I'm not going to set to with my colleague there, Rafe. Good afternoon, incidentally. I believe that on the one hand, the coronation was essential. As Macron said, she wasn't just our queen, she was the queen. It was a global event. There was a huge number of foreign dignitaries, and it was unique because of the length of her reign and because she tied us back to World War II, the Blitz, nostalgic ideas about ourselves. And we saw indeed it had a sort of spontaneous reaction, 250,000 people queuing, and so too something that did actually briefly unite Britain because with incredible acumen and canniness, she dies in Scotland. So of course it's brought right down through the heart of Britain, which, as we know, is fraying at the edges a bit. So, but I would like to set this one-off cost of 162 million, which let's not pretend it isn't sizable. It is sizable. I would like to set that off against a proper interrogation of the royals' finances, because too often we say, oh, but we do pomp and ceremony like no one else. Oh, but we must do this because it's what Britain does. The coronation being another classic example. And this is some kind of cover, if you like, for interrogating the burgeoning, bloated property and financial portfolio that evades taxation in the name of Charles III, formerly in the name of Elizabeth II. And I think one shouldn't be a cover for the other.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Oh, maybe we'll find a point of disagreement here then. I mean, Rafe, where are you on that then? Should actually the Queen's funeral, essentially, and the cost now, be used as a launch pad for a wider financial interrogation of the royal family?
Well, no, because we're confusing two entirely different things. We're confusing the personal wealth of the royal family from what is a state occasion. The clue is in the name. It's a state funeral, just as the coronation is an integral part of our constitution, with the oath taken by the sovereign being a requirement of Parliament. So it's important that we distinguish the role of the head of state from any other aspects of finance. And here we have really the important thing about living in a monarchy is continuity and tradition, and it is through things like state funerals, through jubilees, through royal weddings, and through coronations that provide, in constitutional monarchies, those very rare occasions when a nation can actually come into being. National identity and social cohesion are forged around those key milestones because, unlike republics, we don't have a national Independence Day or an annual revolution like July the 14th, Bastille Day in France, or July the 4th in America to celebrate. And of course, we must remember there's great costs involved in those annual celebrations of Bastille Day, for example. It's very rare that we have those. It's not every year. It's, once a decade, once every 15, 20 years that we have that sort of a thing.
All right. Go on, Tessa. I can see you're itching to get involved here.
Well, you've just done that wonderful bit of hocus pocus there by going, oh, no, but that's totally separate from the personal finances of the monarch. The point is the two aren't separate, because there's this extraordinary situation where we have our head of state, an institution of state, conflated through a personal family. Weirdly, the sovereign avoids inheritance tax, as did the previous sovereign.
Can I just ask on,
that the
can I
Queen's
just ask on that,
personal
Tessa?
wealth grew. When her mother died, for instance, she inherited a portfolio of some 50 to 70 million pounds worth of property and assets.
Yeah, but isn't that so we don't lose the property,
She didn't pay 20 million pounds tax on. That is insanity.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Ditto with King Charles.
Let me just ask you about this, though, Tessa, because I get what you mean, that under normal circumstances, yes, that would be absolutely nuts, OK? But we don't want our royal family to lose, I don't think, anyway, historic properties. I mean, if they were having to pay inheritance, they keep having to raffle them off every single time one of them died. So that is the real reason behind it, isn't it, Tessa? It's not that we want them to necessarily preserve all their wealth. It's so that, you know, some kind of Saudi royal sheikh can't just come over here and buy a load of our royal properties, isn't it?
Well, at the moment, let me tell you, Charles has sold off in the last few months a considerable number of premium racehorses, because guess what? He inherited them, not Anne, because had Anne inherited them, she would have paid tax. We're not just talking properties, but I would argue that the 24 palatial properties that come under the name of the royal family is an extensive portfolio, most of which isn't available to us to go and poke about in and enjoy as the paying public. And I just think there could be a bit of an equivalent where we pay for these wonderful state occasions, we embolden their brand, we allow them to go forth and multiply, and at some point I think they need to give back. There is just extraordinary exemptions, and actually you can strip it back. The property also requires being looked after, guarded. So they have 24-hour security on most of these properties. Minor royals are given security that even considerable ministers of state don't merit. It just doesn't make sense. And I think we need to properly, if we're going to always have a go at Harry, who's left the equation, and that seems to be a cover for not having a proper interrogation of our monarch, who is incidentally worth an estimated £1.8 billion.
OK, right, now, Rafe, Tessa, just to drag us back a bit to the Queen's funeral, Tessa makes some good points there. On the actual Queen's funeral cost, Tessa was quite measured, so I will put up the kind of Republic argument too, which is this is an absolute shameless waste of taxpayers' money. You know, there's no way that this woman who's been leeching off the state should be, carted around the country at the taxpayers' expense for however long. You know, and Rafe, is this something? What would you say to those people who are saying this is a proper example of exactly how elitist the royal family is, whilst we're all struggling to pay our heating? Rafe.
No, well, I think I covered that point in my previous response. But what I would say is, for example, let's look at the arguments that were put forward when we were making a bid for the 2012 London Olympics, which cost £9 billion. And one of the principal arguments was the exposure that it would give to brand Britain and to the UK around the world. Well, the fact was more people watched the wedding of William and Kate. More people watched the funeral of Her late Majesty. More people watched the coronation than watched the Olympic Games for a fraction of the price. So it's certainly value for money there. But let's also remember that the monarchy doesn't cost the British taxpayers a penny, because the income that we give through the sovereign support grant is pegged to 15% of the Crown estate, which
Tessa's lost it.
Surrendered every year.
Tessa's got her head in her
to the state.
Don't roll that one out. Oh, they don't cost us a penny, because they don't play, Rafe, by the same rules as us. But Patrick, to go back to the idea, of the Republicans are going to be losing their heads over the cost of the funeral. I have to point out the hypocrisy. I support the cost of the royal funeral, but we have to level, and I have to level it at channels like yours, the hypocrisy, where on the one hand we go, oh, Harry and Meghan, they go out there talking about acts of service while they rake it in. The royal family does the exact same. They do acts of service. Yeah, but we love the royal family. We allow them to rake it in.
But this is a key point of distinction, right? And this is something I don't think is accounted for by a lot of people when they go, oh, look at the costs of various different things. Sometimes, Tessa, if you love someone in your family, you'll fork out a bit too much maybe at Christmas and birthdays because it doesn't make economic sense for you, but you do it because you love them. But if you don't, I bet you've got an uncle or a cousin or someone like that you don't care about, so you don't want to give them any money. And it's basically the same thing. Look, both of you, thank you very much. We could talk about this all day. I've had a good time.
Same thing.
Oh, it's the same thing. That's enough. Get them off. Right, OK.